Hey everybody, today I want to talk about Stephen King's iconic first 5 books published under his own name. That is Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, Night Shift, and The Stand. Specifically talking about the first Signet paperback editions. These books were all originally published in hardcover by Doubleday in fairly modest runs. They were modest sellers. They were massive sellers in paperback. And in fact, that's arguably where Stephen King found his audience and found his market, particularly after the release of the 1976 film of Carrie, which was a big success and I think really put Stephen King's career into high gear. The original Doubleday first editions are now all tremendously valuable, highly sought after, and highly collectible grails in most Stephen King fans' collections. These paperbacks are far more common. They were published in much greater numbers. But if you were like me and you were sort of getting into your Stephen King kick when you were a kid, you may not have had very much money to spend on books, and the paperbacks are probably what caught your eye as well as caught your pocket money. So to me, although I adore and admire and covet and lust after the Doubleday hardcovers, the paperbacks are actually what get me all nostalgic and are far more familiar to me in what I was pursuing, what I was actually able to buy when I was a kid. And while these books are not rare, they are, approaching 50 years old. So they're also not super common, especially in nice shape. As you can see, some of these are in decent shape and some of them are pretty worn, but they are sort of a special nostalgic thing for me. And anytime I find a first edition paperback, especially of the first 5 books, I always pick it up and add it to the collection. I don't often collect multiples of things, but this is something that I collect as much as I find because they are often still able to be purchased for not a lot of money. It's an easy sell or an easy buy. Famously, and Stephen King has talked about it multiple times in multiple interviews and essays that he's written, the paperback rights for Carrie sold for an unprecedented $400,000, half of which went to Stephen King. And it's a beautiful thing to read about, truly a life-altering amount of money that enabled Stephen King to focus on writing full-time, and really is probably the single thing that's responsible for giving us the Stephen King that we all know and love today. The paperback is interesting choices that were made. Stephen King's name nor the name of the book appear anywhere on the front cover. It simply says, "A novel of a girl possessed of a terrifying power." The cover price is $1.75. I understand that originally the title and Stephen King's name were supposed to be visible on the front cover with a cutaway portion, but the cost was prohibitive. So you open up the front cover to a false front cover that has an image of a city in flames, as well as the title of the book and Stephen King's name. It's fairly easy to tell if you found a first edition of this, because there's a number line on the copyright page, and the first edition, the first printing, has the number 1 in the line. Yep, the one that started it all. I'm paraphrasing, and this may not be completely accurate, but I've heard that the hardcover of Carrie sold somewhere in the neighborhood of around 10,000 copies. And then the paperback of Carrie sold something like 1 million copies, and truly got the ball rolling towards Stephen King becoming the household name that he is today. Salem's Lot followed in the mold of Carrie in that Stephen King's name nor the title of the book appear on the cover. They are, of course, on the spine. This is, to me, one of the coolest covers in all of the Stephen King universe. It is an embossed black face. The face seems pretty androgynous to me, but I have heard it described as a girl's face with a single red drop of blood from the mouth, the only bit of color on the front cover. It is creepy, it is spooky. I would have loved to have seen rows and rows of these things, crispy and brand new back in the 70s in supermarket bookstore stands. That must have really caught people's eyes. The price on this, $1.95. There is no false cover on this. It just opens straight up to the title. And there is also a number line, and the first printing has the number 1. Those are the things to look for. When I was hunting for a copy of this, I would have liked, of course, for the spine to be in slightly better shape, but the biggest selling point for me was the front cover. So I was looking for the copy I could find that had the nicest front cover, because it is very prone to wear. It shows wear quite a bit, being all black, and the more wear and tear it has, the harder it is to see the iconic embossed image. But I'm pretty pleased with this one. I did have to find it on eBay. I haven't found one of these in the wild in years and years. Another gimmick, maybe the coolest gimmick of all, on the next book, The Shining, which actually in the first printing has a reflective, mirror-esque metallic cover. The image is very subtle and understated, very effective, very creepy. This time, the title of the book and Stephen King's name end up on the front cover, which he must have felt like was a real step in the right direction for his recognition as an author. It's the spine, the back cover. Cover price on this is $2.50. And like Carrie and Salem's Lot, it is easy enough to tell if you have a first printing, because in the number line, again, the number 1 is visible. Stephen King had started to pick up some notice in the press by this point, and you can see that there are now a few pages of press blurbs championing his work. He was well on his way. Next up is Stephen King's first published collection of short stories, Night Shift. Many of the stories were from his early career, pre-Carrie, the stories that were published in various men's magazines. And according to the mythology around Stephen King, every time one of these stories sold, he'd get a check in the mail at just about the right time to solve some sort of family financial catastrophe, needing to repair the car. Well, where are we going to possibly find the money to do that? And then a check arrives in the mail for payment for another story that Stephen King sold to another magazine. And those stories ended up in this book. Arguably, it's his best collection. He's done several collections since. This one is the first and, in my opinion, the most iconic. What the image that I grew up very familiar with on later printings, the image of the eyes in the hand was the front cover. There would be words, the title and Stephen King's name just simply put over this image. But the earliest printings had this blue die-cut cover over the top. So anytime I find a blue cover with the die-cut holes for the eyes, I pick it up because I love it. And like the other books, there's a number line that includes the number 1. That's how you know you have a first printing, cover price of $2.50. I do have multiple copies of this. They're not all first printings. Something that I look for on this particular book is that the holes on the cover match the eyes. It is not always the case. For instance, this, which is still a little creepy because it's like the eyes are peeking out at you. Unfortunately, this is the nicest overall quality copy I have. I think it's a 9th printing, but as you can see, the holes don't quite match up, and that sort of drives me crazy. Perhaps this is the reason why they stopped with the die-cut cover, because it was annoying and challenging to line up just right. But at some point, shortly after the 9th printing, it's the latest blue cover that I have. I think they did away with the blue cover and just switched to the slightly more familiar black with the image of the bandaged hand with the eyes inside. And then to round out the first 5, of course, the epic and legendary The Stand. Of course, this is the original version that was published. Wasn't the original version that Stephen King wrote, which he submitted to Doubleday, and they balked at the length. And it wasn't from any artistic reasoning that I am aware of that they told him to edit or cut down the book. They simply balked at how costly it would be to produce, how costly it would have to sell for, and they figured that nobody would buy a book that was that thick or cost that much. Of course, Stephen King was given some vindication in the early 90s when he was able to publish an expanded version that more closely matched his original vision. But anyway, for over a decade, this was what there was. This was The Stand, a novel of ultimate horror. Cover price on this one is $2.95, if you can see. And again, fairly easy to tell just what you got because there's a 1 in the number line. So like I said, this is really almost purely a sentimental thing for me. These are the books that have a special place in my heart. These are the books that I was most familiar with. None of these are books that I actually owned as a kid or a teenager, but I did at one point own copies of all of these books in the first edition. Back in the dark ages when I was a kid, I did not appreciate that for what it was. I was not necessarily a collector. There was a lot that I didn't know and didn't understand. But as much as I value the Doubleday hardcovers, these are the ones that really get my rose-colored glasses fogged up with warmth and nostalgia. So anyway, thank you for joining me for this slightly careworn and creased trip down memory lane. I hope that it's been enjoyable, and I hope that this has triggered some nostalgia in you as well. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.